talking about how the overall level of assaults maybe has leveled off, but the serious ones have shot up. Why do you attribute that to? I mean, it seems logical that the total assaults would also go up, but they haven't. But serious assaults have.
Well, I think a lot of things attribute to that. Number one, we've had the increase in population over the past few years, and we have a lot more violent offenders than what we used to have back in the day. The gang affiliations inside the institutions are still at rise. We have shifting in our DYS facilities that bring more violent offenders to our institutions. And some of the Ohio plan or the three-tier system, which puts more violent inmates into certain institutions, where it used to be where inmates would kind of help control one another when you had some violent, some non-violent inmates in the institution. Everybody kind of controlled each other. When you start populating institutions with more violent inmates without increasing adequate staffing on the ground, those violent incidents increase exponentially.
Chris, if the state continues the program it's on where it's trying to reduce the prison population, it seems like it's going to follow that model that the juvenile system is going through. You're going to have a lot more dangerous inmates, but a lower population. At least that's their goal. Do you see that as the future? And what would you like the state to do to respond to that in terms of staffing down the road 5, 10, 15 years?
There's a lot of things. I mean, we've been through. I've been with the Department of Corrections over 25 years myself. I started off as a corrections officer. I started off in Ohio State Reformatory. Very violent prison system. In over 25 years, we've seen nothing but an increase of inmates in the system. We went through sentence reform, we went through restructuring, we talk about recidivism rates, but the bottom line is people are going to prison. The bottom line is violent crimes, are violent crimes. And no matter where you put those inmates, if you don't accordingly increase the staffing level to accommodate those situations, violence happens. There's a misconception under the general public right now. In a prison system, we don't carry guns inside the fence. We don't have tasers, We've only gotten mace in the department within the last 7 years. So when you're on the ground working in a pod with 250 inmates, the best thing you've got, hopefully, is a partner with you, a set of cuffs, and maybe a radio. Now, we do have some electronic monitoring systems that can tell other people when you're down, when you're being assaulted, when you're physically not on your feet. But not having the people to respond to those issues is the problem we have. And we believe in programming in the system. We believe in trying to help incarcerated people return to be good, productive citizens in the state. But the bottom line is programming in an institution is a 9-to-5 job. An institution runs 24/7. And another big misconception of the general public, we do not lock people away behind steel doors 24 hours a day. When the morning comes, the doors are open and inmates are moving about inside their institutions. They're going to chow, they're going to education, they're going to programming. So the conception of you're in a pod with 200 people that are locked down behind a steel door is incorrect. Our people are arm to arm, shoulder to shoulder with incarcerated felons every day. And some of the things we talk about today is not just an increase of violence on staff. We have to look across the board at what happened to our prison system or what is happening to our prison system for the incarcerated felons within. The suicide rates increased, the murder rates increased, the violence against other inmates that have increased. Our job in the Department of Corrections is to provide a safe, secure, and humane environment. And that's just not from 9 to 5. When most administrative staff are there, when most supervisors are there, when food service staff is there, when librarians are there, when educators are there. Our job extends well beyond the 5 o'clock, which most institutions, inmates are still out their cells till 9, sometimes 10 o'clock at night. Sometimes they have late nights on Fridays. So there's a lot of things that attribute to the increase in violence in our system. Programming, quintessentially, is good. But having control of any dangerous environment is the most important thing we do. And we can only do that through security staff of an institution. You can't do it through technology. You can't do it through add-ons. Those are the things that we have to accomplish.
But what do you think of the three-tier system?
The three-tier system, I think along the way, somewhere along the way in discussions with DRC, it might make sense. But anytime you change the structure of the Department of Corrections system without adding the adequate staffing on the ground in the system, it's doomed for failure. We see what's happened in the DYS system. They're shoving the DYS system into the DRC system. Well, we can't shove the DRC system into the community-based correctional facility system because those are non-violent offenders to start with. So as you see the increase in violent offenses inside the state of Ohio, the increase of violence in our prison system, the three-tier system can only go so far without adding adequate staff statewide. Does that make sense?
Chris, you mentioned the number 46 at one prison, did you say?
No, that's around the, no, not at one prison, that's around the state. That's for this year. And those are offenses and those are acts of violence that may have put people out on the street indefinitely.
So that was 46 in calendar 13 or?
Yes,
calendar, that's in calendar year.
Yeah.
And that was,
Pull that up for you, Alan.
that was people who had suffered such serious injuries that they're not going back to work?
That they did not return to work within the next day. Some may be weeks, some may be months,
So
some may
these
be
two
years.
folks here with you today would have been in that.
They
Yes.
have been out for some time
They're part of that.
back into the system. We have some people that are still in the system that were injured, that may be on extensive medication, that may have PTSD type syndromes, that may have traumatic brain injury type issues, because we're talking about violent offenses. That's exactly what it is. It's not somebody that may have got punched back the next day, although those are still violent issues that we haven't included. We're talking about those injuries that people sometimes never really heal from.
So Chris, I wanted to ask you, 400 officers is what, there's 28, 29 institutions
Yes, ma'am.
statewide, so you're only talking about adding a dozen corrections officers at each institution. Is that even enough to prevent the kind of situations like Officer Cavendish or Meade faced?
At this point in time, I mean, we've been talking about this with the department back and forth for the last year about what is a safe number. There's no real cookie cutter approach to what is a safe staffing level based on the type of inmates you have in that facility. So you may have some institutions that receive a heavier volume than others, but across the board, the lack of staff that we're experiencing since 2007 of 800 plus correctional officers versus the 50,000 inmates we're dealing with now, those are the types of things that we need to sit down together and say, what is the violence rate of this institution? And look at the number as a whole and see what we need to allocate to each institution to make sure that those are safe environments.
You indicated that some people had been added. Over what quarters was that, and to what extent were they
We have some
classified
people
or unclassified?
Pipeline, currently we have some people that have been added to the Mansfield Correctional Institution, and that equates out to some of the increase in violence. We've had some people added to the Toledo Institution, starting to reallocate, but it's still,
And
it's
when
good.
was that?
That was in this past year. Actually, probably within the last 2 months.
Okay, I mean, is it in this quarter, or was it in
This-
the last quarter, or when was
This would have been this quarter,
this? Of this year?
yes.
Okay.
And Chillicothe was the other thing.
And you talked about management. Is that a net gain in management, or is this a ratio thing that management relative to staff management is higher as well as the top and heavier than the bottom?
The top inside our institutions, we have been top heavy in management for quite some time, and we went through several different transitions over the year about unit management versus custody, medical. I mean, there's all types of issues that we go through over years of how we deal with prison issues. But when you look at the bottom line at the end of the day, the violence indicators that we're looking at, the increase in harsh violence inside the institutions, like I said, it's not just a 9-to-5 job. We have to look at those things after the 5 o'clock time frame, and those people that are there are the correctional officers on the ground. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just want to be clear. Is the system now more top-heavy than it was